I think they've got a tractor in the field. So if you can hear all the rumbling, this is my life this time of year. Hey everyone, it's Lori, and I am here with my March reading wrap up, take two. I recorded this once, but somehow my mouth and my sound did not fit. So, being technologically inept of being able to fix that without re recording, here I am again to redo this wrap up. So, I read 8 books in the month of March, and I did lean a little more heavily audiobook than usual. So the first book I finished in the month of March was Unschooled by Carrie McDonald and Peter Gray. I listened to this one on Audible. I do also have it as a Kindle edition, but this one I mostly listened to while sitting in the car waiting on kids at events before the entire world shut down. Um, and I think it was a really good book for me to read right now because it kind of gave me permission to open up myself and my kids more to um, kind of a more unschool-ish way of looking at our school. As homeschoolers, everything is very weird for us now too. Not as weird as it probably is for public schoolers with all the sorts of schools being shut down and everything, and having to move to e-learning and things like that. But it has allowed me to loosen up quite a bit because I tend to be a little type A, and realize that my kids learning the things that they are interested in is just as worthy as the things that I feel like we should check off so that they can get into college and have the education that is kind of just expected of them. So I really enjoyed Unschooled. The audiobook was well done. And just so much interesting information in there. I would highly recommend it. I recommend this to anyone who might be considering whether or not to allow their kids to have more of a say in their own education. It was a very good book. The second book I finished in March was The Fated Sky. This is the second book in the Lady Astronaut series. The third book is coming out, I believe, sometime this year, towards the end of the year. But the first of this series we had gotten on Audible, and I really enjoyed the storyline. But there is a lot of the main character is married, and she and her husband really enjoy their marriage. Let's put it that way. So that was a little uncomfortable in the audiobook. It was a little bit better in this one, partially because you could kind of skim a little bit more by reading when you get to those occasions, and partly because the husband and wife were separated for large chunks of this book. Not like separated, like having marital problems, but more like just physical separation because of their jobs. So this one was very interesting. I liked how this went a little bit further than the first book did in terms of talking about race relations and gender roles. Basically, the premise is that a catastrophic meteor hits in like maybe the early 60s. So it takes place over a period of time. Might have even been in the 50s when the meteor hit. And it caused a change in the climate, and at some point, Earth is going to be uninhabitable. So they realize they need to start colonizing space. That's just the general gist of the series. So this one was very good. I'm looking forward to the third book. I kind of hoped to use an Audible credit on it before we canceled our Audible, but it's not yet available for pre-order for that. But it is pre-order. You can pre-order the book. Next, I read a book. I was hoping to go to a retreat with this author in April. That's clearly not going to be happening now, but the book is Left to Tell, Discovering God Amidst the Rwandan Holocaust, and this is by Immaculée Ilibigaza. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but Immaculée, I've heard her speak before, and she is a powerful speaker and just a beautiful person in terms of, like, she just radiates joy, and it's amazing reading her story of almost all of her family being killed during the genocide in Rwanda. And she herself, along with several other women of her tribe, were hidden in a bathroom for, I believe it was 20 some days. Yeah, I'm not even sure exactly how long, but it was a long period of time where they were just trying to be as silent as possible and hoping that the people who were out kind of creating death squads to get rid of her entire tribe wouldn't find this bathroom that they were hidden in. I was a little worried about this one because I don't deal well with dark things. And obviously, there's a lot of darkness in this book just because of the topic. But the beginning talks about her life before the genocide, and then the middle part is about her being in hiding during it, and then the final part is about her life kind of immediately after, and kind of rebuilding her life from there. So it's extremely hopeful and not nearly as difficult to read as I thought it was going to be. So I do really highly recommend this. If you don't know much about the genocide in Rwanda, this would be very eye opening. I know I didn't know a whole lot before this, and I feel like I learned a lot through this book. The next book I read on Kindle. I got it through the library. And this is one that I kind of picked up because of my experience reading The Fault in Our Stars and then The Emperor of All Maladies. And so this book is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. So this is the story of both the woman Henrietta Lacks, who died of a cancer, but during her treatment in the hospital, some of her cancer cells were taken, and those were the first cells that were really able to be grown for research purposes. So they're the HeLa strain of cells. So, but she didn't know anything about it. She died. Her family didn't know anything about it for years. And then everything started to kind of come to light. So the author learns about this in a class in college, and just became fascinated with the story, and decided that she wanted to basically write this book. So she managed to get in contact with the family, and this whole book is very interestingly laid out because it jumps back and forth in time period and goes from like Henrietta's history and life to Henrietta's children, particularly her daughter, who is kind of the main voice of the family in this book. She and the author learn about her mom together because she was very small when her mother died, and so she didn't know much about her mom at all. So it's just such an amazing story, and I think I was maybe 5% of the way into the book when I texted my husband and told him he needed to get on the wait list for the audio version of this book so that he could listen to it too, because I just knew he'd love it, and he did. So that was another really great book I read in March. Next, I read a middle grade book. This is one that my daughters wanted to watch the movie version of, so the day we were going to watch the movie, I read the book, and that is Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli. This definitely is a manic pixie dream girl trope book, but I thought the book was fun and well written and did a lot of things well, and I thought the movie was the polar opposite. It got everything wrong. Don't bother watching the movie, but the book is definitely one that is a fun book to read. It's not like earth-shattering or a must-read, but if you're looking for a cute middle grade book that's very kind of sweet and not too racy in any way, shape, or form, I would recommend Stargirl. When I was putting this into Goodreads, I found out that there is a second Stargirl book that I didn't know about, so I checked that out for Charlotte, and she has read it, so I might read that sometime in April. So one of the things that has happened with everything kind of shutting down is I don't have access to the library as I normally do. So I'm having to do more through the digital consortium. And so I'm actually listening to a lot more audiobooks, partly because the books I've been reading are available on audio, and partly because I am having a harder time focusing on regular books, just because, I don't know, I worry too much. I think too much about what's been going on, and it's just easier if I'm listening to something to kind of distract my brain. So the next book and the final book that I read in the month of March are books 9 and 10 in the Wheel of Time series. Book 9 is Winter's Heart, and book 10 is Crossroads of Twilight. I don't normally read 2 Wheel of Time books in a month, but that's just kind of what I've been doing to keep myself kind of from being too panicky. And I'm well into book 11 now at the time of recording this, since I had to re-record everything. I'm still very much enjoying the Wheel of Time books. I think that maybe book 10 or book 11 is supposed to be where the slog is over, but I enjoyed all of the books in the so-called slog as well. So I'm just finding everything to kind of be ramping up. You can tell at this point, 10 books into the series, 11 books into the series, that we're getting closer to the final big conflict. So I'm thinking that there's a good chance I may finish out the series in the next couple months, since we may be spending even more time at home. We do have some family members that are at a higher risk. So even when our stay-at-home orders are lifted, because we are under a stay-at-home order here, we probably will not be going out as much as we normally would, and maybe skipping some of the summer activities we would normally do. So I may just finish up the Wheel of Time series and then have to find something else to binge on. And then finally, the last book I'm going to talk about is This Tremendous Lover by Eugene Boylan, Monsignor, I believe. This was a very good spiritual book to be reading during this whole pandemic time. It talks basically about how each person can relate to God, and that it's not this big, huge thing that only the very most spiritual people can do. It's a very practical book, very accessible. But my one thing I do want to point out about this book, if you do choose to read it, it was written in the 40s, and so there are some ways of talking that are a little bit strange, and then some things that are just a little uncomfortable. For instance, there's a chapter on marriage in here, and while it has lots of very valid and good points in it, he does kind of flat out state that a married woman shouldn't be working because her job is the home. And that even rubs me the wrong way as a stay-at-home mom and housewife. And I don't work and have only worked off and on in my married life, occasionally, but it rubs the modern sensibilities a little bit the wrong way. So if you can take that with a grain of salt and say, okay, this book is a product of its time, gender roles have changed and improved a bit in the last 60 years or whatever. More than that. I'm getting old. Anyway, you just know that this book is a product of its time, and while it has lots and lots of great stuff, there might be a few things you just have to kind of hold your nose and deal with. So I started this one in February. It just took me quite a while to read. I was reading it pretty slowly. Not because it's hard, just because, I take my time on my spiritual books a lot more than I do on fiction books. So those were all of the books that I read in March. I'd love to know if you've read any of these books what you thought of them, or if you have recommendations for me, or if you're interested in reading any of these books, leave me a comment down below. Feel free to subscribe to my channel. I'm not perhaps the most consistent poster of videos, but I do enjoy getting on here and talking about books, and I'd love to have you back. And other than that, I hope you are all well, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.